please welcome Conference Program Committee Chair and Moderator Jacqui Hoover and the panel, Project Permits. How are they affecting Hawaii's transition goals?
Thank you. I won't start over except to say that we have a very diverse group of panelists with us today. They bring a lot of different perspectives, and because we do have 5 panelists, rather than having me have each one of them talk about their bio and so forth, I'm going to ask you to please indulge us, read their bios, speak with them individually after the panel so we can jump right into the conversation. And the conversation we're having today is about permitting, but it's not the usual conversation we conduct about permitting. What we wanted to talk about today is how do all of us participate in the permitting process so that it benefits everyone. And more importantly, who and what is impacted by these permits. So we wanted to start off by having Mahina Martin, who is Chief of Communications and Public Affairs for the County of Maui, Office of the Mayor, start, because Mahina also comes from private sector and also has worked for Hawaiian Electric, so she brings multiple perspectives that she can share with us.
Thank you, Jacqui. How's this? Okay, well, thank you, Jacqui. I feel like this is a reunion when you come back into and see all your energy friends and co-workers and colleagues and fellow workers who are trying to move the transformation of clean energy in Hawaii. But I really am here. You'll hear from the experts in permitting. That is obviously not my forte. But I just wanted to share a little bit about the long view. Nothing's more exciting than talking about permitting right after lunch, right? So we'll try to make our way through it, and I appreciate all the complexities and the necessity of the discussion. But let's talk a little bit about transformation. We've been hearing about it for quite some time now. We're at a pivotal point in Hawaii's history where we need to make quicker decisions, realizing that we started a while ago in this transition and in this long view of where we're going to take Hawaii going forward. But you know, earlier today in the panel, I heard, and I'm so sorry, I think it was Mark Glick in that discussion with Leilani Chao from Moloka'i, talking about how we all are looking for clean energy, that commonality, that direction that we're all connected to. But what I really wanted to challenge that with is that what we're looking for is to better our lifestyles, to better our opportunities, to better our livelihoods for our people. And our people of all islands and our people around the world, as you could hear from the global discussions, even from Daphne's really rich perspective and valuable voice at the table. So to me, when we talk about energy, when we take that long view, we're actually talking about prosperity. We're talking about giving energy to the young student who wants to make sure that his laptop is going to charge up. We want to make sure that the equipment in the classroom is going to work for the students and the educator, who is going to bring prosperity to a family through education. We want to make sure that we're talking about safety, that through energy, lights go on in dark neighborhoods, that the street lights are there so that our cars can navigate these roads. When we're talking about energy and the future of Hawaii, we're talking about sustenance. And I do mean sustenance by way of our microwaves, maybe, our refrigerators, our ovens. We're so reliant on our kitchen gadgets. We're so reliant on our restaurants and our food hubs that provide the sustenance. Certainly, we want to go back to an older way of being more, having food more available outside of the contemporary ways, but this is our current life. We talk about healthcare. Through energy, we know that our kupuna are safe. We know that care homes can have what they need. We know that medical technology, equipment, research can happen. All those things come from energy. So whether it's moving forward in clean energy means that we get to keep all of those things. It means that we get to pivot Hawaii where we need to go, mindful of what it gives to everyone each and every day, regardless of demographics, regardless of age, regardless of your needs, your lifestyle, your perspective, or what island in Hawai'i you come from. It also gives us happiness, believe it or not. Whether you're a developer or a permitter that actually signs off on something and hallelujah, they go away because they finally got their permit. That's the reality of it. It also means that it gives us a chance to take our children to the movies, to listen to music that got generated from a music studio that was charged with the energy that we all and you all have had a hand to develop in Hawaii. So these are the perspectives that are important. And when Jacqui called and she said, what happens if we don't hit those goals? If the benchmarks in 2030, if the goal, the ambitious goal that Hawaii has of 2045 are not met, then we're facing a very reflective time where we understand that there are trade-offs. All of permitting comes from a history of public-driven need. Safety, health, environmental protection, our permitting rules, our regulations are born out of those needs, and those reflect the values of the community that it serves. So in time, as we march forward to 2030, 2045, the values will change, the values will pivot, maybe they run parallel to the way it once was. But those are reflective of whatever the times are and wherever people's livelihoods, wherever people's lifestyles are. So I really wanted to talk about that and share that with you. Today we're talking about permitting. I hear a lot about policy. I hear about people, procedures. We talk about the public good. And we're also talking about possibilities. For the County of Maui, we like to talk about a time called Kipuka. And this time of Kipuka, if you've ever watched lava flow, well, Hawaii Island, you should know that. When you look at lava in Hawaii, we call it a'a, or we call it pahoihoi, right? The smooth pahoihoi or the really rough edge a'a lava. But when the time has come and the lava has settled, there's usually some growth that comes out of that. And if you look through a lava field, you'll see that little fern, or you'll see something growing through. It's just trying to get through a really hard terrain and a time when the terrain has changed drastically. These are the possibilities. So when we get out of just the silo, the single-purpose permitting, we're taking that long view. It's just a part of that big picture. And I hope we keep that in mind as we talk about permitting or get through the next day and a half left of the conference. But thank you so much, Jacqui.
Thank you. And many of you in the audience know me, so I can see some of you chuckling and saying, Jacqui pulled another Tom Sawyer Huckleberry Finn and she got somebody else to do the whitewashing of the fence. But having said that, I wanted to turn to Zendo Kern to start the talk story about permitting, and we'll get you started. And the goal is that they'll have a talk story session, and I'll be quiet until it's Q&A time.
Okay, aloha everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be here and to share. Zendo Kern, Plan Director for Hawaii County. And I never thought I'd be sitting here as a planning director and talking about permitting. I was born in an unpermitted shack out in North Kohala, grew up in an unpermitted home that eventually got permitted, and here we are talking about permitting. So when I think about permitting, I think of a couple different areas. One is the philosophy that I have, and it's, are we moving towards what we want or away from what we don't want? Are we moving towards what we want or away from what we don't want? And one of the things I really appreciate about the conference so far, a lot of the conversation has really been towards what we want. And we're moving towards what we want. It's a vibrant Hawaii. It's a Hawaii that our children can stay here. Versus the away from is, I don't want to be dependent on fossil fuel. I don't want to see a sea level rise. That's an away from. And usually when we focus on those things, we get more of that. And so having that mindset of where are we going, what do we want, and keeping that conversation going. So that's the direction. And that's the direction we've taken with the planning department. The other area is really boiled down to one word when it comes to permitting: certainty. Certainty. We all want certainty. The person filing an application, the person wanting the permit, want certainty. They want to know, am I going to get it in a reasonable period of time? Are my property rights going to be honored? Is there going to be communication through this process? Is it going to be a work with or work against? And I think everybody coming from the private side going for an application would like that certainty. From the county side, we would like a level of certainty. We would like complete plans. We'd like effective communication. We'd like a good, thorough preliminary discussion around these elements. So when it comes in, okay, they're complete and we can move forward. But the area that's really, really important that I think helps fast track these areas is the certainty that the community needs. They need that certainty. They need to understand that when we're moving forward, permitting something, that we are honoring all the previous work that's been done from the culture, our environment, the socioeconomics, and that we're doing that in a manner that's true to our community. And when all of those come together, we actually have an efficient permitting process. We're working towards that in Hawaii County. I don't think that we necessarily have that now, but it's interesting to observe and continue to move in that direction. Just for example, my West Hawaii office used to take 3 months to look at a building permit and process a building permit, and we're not the primary processors of the building permit. Our average time is 3 days. Our plan approval, thanks. Our plan approval process used to be very long and arduous. It's generally all done within 30 days. So there's a level of efficiency there, and that comes from the communication. And it's very interesting because I've seen a few different things occur, and I'll share one story of where I see it kind of deteriorate. If a person comes in with a large project, we meet with the mayor, myself, Department of Public Works, and all the agencies, and it's like, okay, it's a very important project. We need to move it forward. Let's fast track it. Okay, great. Everybody's on board. Let's go. Then we see the application come in, the plans come in. They're not what we need to see. Unfortunately, they're missing. There's the people that are doing it. They don't necessarily understand it. There's a disconnect, and so now all of a sudden there comes a pushback, and the people within the county are like, I thought we were going to fast track this, but the plans are crap, and I can't do that. Now the person that's applying it, the professionals, the consultants, are saying, but this isn't the way that we do it in the place that we're coming from. This is wrong too. And instead of coming together and saying, how can we make this work very efficiently, both sides begin to dig their heels in. And we start throwing bags of poopy back and forth at each other. And everybody loses. And so what I'm hoping for is more of that mid-level communication and understanding of what does it take, a clear process, and knowing when an application is submitted, you do ABC, you're going to get that result, and we'll be responsive and we'll communicate. Those are just some of the basic fundamentals of what I see and elements to move forward, and happy to continue the dialogue.
Great, thank you, Zendo. And if we could hear from your colleague on Maui, Kathleen, it'd be great to hear.
Hi everybody. I think all I'd like to say is ditto. I mean, we're in the same predicament. I agree that there's this desire to have certainty, and we had a zoning audit done for our code back in 2018, and that was one of the primary things that came out of it, is that everybody wants certainty. It's not just the developer, it's the public, it's the environmentalist, it's the person that's across the street. If everybody knows what's going to happen, who, what, when, where, and how, then there's really not that much room for people to get upset. I mean, you can still get upset, but if it's spelled out, at least there's clarity. So we are in the process of rewriting our zoning code, Title 19. It was basically written back in the 60s and then piecemealed, updated throughout the years. So it's very disjointed. Still had things in there like haberdasheries and things that need to go. But getting to permitting and processing, we realize that our code is outdated. There's things in there that could help foster these projects along better. By the same token, you still have that human element that even if you had everything done, it's the trade-offs that I think Mahina was alleging to or is going to, that what's the priority? What's going to be the priority for the public for these projects? Do we want them? Do we not want them? Because we can process the permit. That's the technical part. It's the human part that gets in the way, if you want to say, or can make a project better. And again, like kind of what are you moving towards or what are you moving away from? Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. So, Gary, we talk about certainty, and I know that as a developer yourself, one of the things that we did not talk about, and I think you could definitely speak to, is the importance of permitting and certainty for investors. You're looking for that predictability. Your banks, your funders are looking for that predictability. Can you take us through your experience with permitting and the impacts?
Sure, Jacqui. Thanks for the invite today. And I'm listening to familiar voices here from the counties of what we see on the development side and on the engineering side. And it reminds me of a few comments I'll make in a minute. But with respect to certainty, it's translated directly into dollars, right? So the more risk there is of a project not going, being delayed, not getting a return on investment that was promised to the investors is significant, to the point where we could put all the effort into the planning and permitting, and then the investors decide at the end of the day it's just not worth their dollars. Their dollars are better spent someplace else. So, but I do believe on a previous panel, someone mentioned, what is your commitment to the state of Hawaii, right? And so you need to partner with developers that do have a commitment, some skin in the game to the local community. So I think that's one thing. So unfortunately, many jurisdictions have a least cost type of approach to the infrastructure project process, and when they would really be better served with a more holistic, value-added perspective when it comes to cost, and then look at a life cycle cost. So there's a lot going on here. There's a lot to discuss. I do believe a couple of challenges that we have. The energy sector is going through what many of us term a transformational change, generational change, right? The demand that we're putting and the stress we're putting on the system to make this transition from 40-year-old technology to modern technology is significant. It can't be overstated, really. And so getting the local jurisdictions, the state jurisdictions, the federal jurisdictions to the point where they can support the stress on the system is significant. It's a significant lift. And, all of our budgets aren't, as big as we'd like them to be sometimes. And even after post-COVID, even before COVID, we were having resource constraints. And now that COVID seems to have exacerbated that a little bit. So, but with that being said, if you look at Hawaii in particular, you guys have a phenomenal plan. You have phenomenal commitment. The integrated grid plan, which Honolulu Hawaiian Electric submitted, is a good plan. It sets a roadmap for developers to go forward and to put projects in place that are meaningful to the state and can contribute in the long term to the quality of life that you were speaking about. And my only advice to developers would be the speed of your permitting process is just as importantly determined by the quality of your submittals that it is, the resource demands on the local jurisdiction. I find that if I want something approved quickly, I put a lot of homework into it myself. I do all my background work, and I get a good submittal. That makes the job of the jurisdiction much easier to say, well, this is fairly simple to approve because they've followed all the rules, checked all the boxes, they've done community outreach, they've put a good plan in place. And we, as an engineer, I learned a long time ago, the more you invest in planning for a project, the better a project goes. The more certainty you get when you're executing the project. Because I certainly don't want cultural issues, community issues, financial issues to arise when I'm executing a project and I've already mobilized millions of dollars of machinery and equipment and resources. I want all of those problems solved in the planning phase of that project, and certainly the permitting process is part of that planning phase. So.
Great, thank you. And Jordan, I know you have some now you want to share with us as well.
Thank you. Aloha kako. Yeah, so it's funny listening to Zendo because it sounds like he works in my office. You know, I have a little different approach. You know, fortunately, I've got to seen and been on kind of all sides of the permit process as an applicant, as an owner, as a contractor, and as the regulator. And so I think what that brings in my perspective is sort of a sense of empathy for all the parties at play and what needs to get accomplished through this permit process. And you know, that's what I try to bring to our staff and help us help each other get through this process, because it is complicated. As Mahina mentioned, it is a system of protections we've built here in Hawaii, and you know, particularly in Maui, intentionally to slow things down, to make sure we're doing things right. And so we just have to acknowledge that it is a gauntlet to get through, but there is a way through it, and we're gonna, you know, be partners in getting through it, so we can all succeed. Like Mahina mentioned, you know, energy is a critical infrastructure component. Public Works, we maintain the county roads here in Maui, and so we appreciate, you know, that function that critical infrastructure provides to all communities, you know, from the richest to the lowest income. So yeah, empathy and in partnership, I think, is a big one where, you know, especially for Maui, a lot of times it was the developer's gonna build it, go build it, and we'll see how well you do. Where now, I think we've realized we all have to be more partners and stakeholders in getting these goals achieved.
So Zendo, this is something that you and I had discussed previously, and it's related to the culture and what people are expecting in the different culture. And I'm not just talking about indigenous culture, but the overall culture of developing, especially with relation to the energy sector. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that.
Sure. Culture. What a topic. Land use in Hawaii is really steeped in so many different cultural perspectives, right? You take the traditional approach, and then you have the, you know, that plantation approach in between, and then where we are now, trying to bring that back and really trying to understand and respect the culture. And I think Jordan said it right. It's empathy, and having the empathy for everybody that's being affected from it, all the way down to the people that are actually pulling the energy off the grid, but also the person that's going to work based on that permit being issued, and how they're actually able to effectuate their family lives. If the permit isn't issued, they're not working. And so when we come back from a cultural perspective, in my view, and there was mention of this place called Puna earlier. I grew up in Puna, and it was a gnarly place. And as a white kid, it was 10 times as gnarly. And I wouldn't wish it upon anybody, but I also wouldn't change it for myself, because what that does is it brought an empathy and understanding towards the diverse culture that we work with. And so oftentimes I feel in land use and in permitting, we tend to, not we, but a lot of folks don't want to embrace the challenge. They don't want to lean into it because it's hard. It's really tough. You're in a room with a diverse set of culture and people saying, I don't want that. You're messing up my place. You have no respect. And meanwhile, we're trying to solve at a greater level that it's hard for certain people to understand. I have family members that don't even understand it when we're saying we need to permit and make these efforts reasonable, because for me, if our children keep being our biggest export, we lose every day. And that, we're exporting culture. We're exporting people, generations out of here. And so when we come back to saying, how do we embrace that culture? So really quick, the way I put it is, there was a spot called Pohiki that I grew up surfing. It's currently covered under lava. And a friend was out there with a group of surfers. And one of the guys out there surfing, all of a sudden got hit by a tiger shark. Tiger shark comes up and whacks him and starts just shaking him. And everybody out there in the water scatters and they swim away. And my friend, who was another guy there, he swam towards Ulu Boy, who was getting attacked by the shark, to save him. Who swims towards the shark? Not many people. But the way that we solve our culture, the way that we solve our permitting issues is we swim towards the shark. We lean into the issues. We embrace the folks. We embrace the different cultures, the different perspectives, come together, have the conversation, find compromise, and move forward in a way that's the best that we can for all of us, respecting and embracing all of our culture and honoring those places. And that's where I come back to certainty. When folks know that that underlying element is going to be respected, we can actually have a conversation and really begin to go higher. Because we're no longer talking about desecrating Evie. We're talking about where are we siting it. Are you going to see it? Are you going to experience it? You know, it's a different paradigm now. And for me, it's all about swimming towards the shark and embracing all the different aspects of culture and working together. Thank you.
So I just wanted to add on that a little bit, because in Hawaii, we cannot have a conversation without culture. It comes out even in permitting. And it's important to know, and I'm sure everyone here experiences it, when we look at permitting, the permitting entities, and particularly with energy, because it's such an evolution and revolution at the same time, it's just moving forward, you know, at quite a fast clip. But when you think about it, the permitting agencies moving the energy projects through in the magnitude it is in Hawaii with our ambitious goal are facing the bookends of our public and our communities saying, slow down the review process. And then you have developers or projects or industry saying, expedite the review process. So in that middle is that, you know, that real crux of what do we do? Is it the culture of the place that is going to motivate us to go this way or that way? And how do we solve all of that? And where is that point in time where we can change permitting laws, that we can accept that maybe some of the evolution of energy and the need and the desire of our public to have a different way of having energy brought to their homes and their lives be enough for the trade-offs in the use of land, which have equal high values, in the use of time and review and public input, which has high value in small towns and in island cultures. So I think this is a really interesting point in time, because we may have archaic rules, but they are rules. We have a culture and a lifestyle in Hawaii that has a high value beyond just rules permitting conversations, but they really is a almost devout attention to aina, to natural resources. So they clash with this development idea of, you know, who says it's good for us? Who says it's lost in translation? When we bring big energy projects together, we talk about big infrastructure, we talk about permitting challenges, but sometimes we forget, someone is saying, how is it translated? You know, what will it give us? So I just wanted to expand that thought just a little bit.
If I could riff off that real quick too, it's often said, and you folks probably heard it many times, sometimes you need to go slow to go fast. And it's to take that time to really understand and do that baseline, just like you were saying, Gary. Like, you need to actually have that planning. And when you can set that element up and you get into that ministerial type permit, we can go quickly. But I think it's really important to really understand is what you're getting at, that the entirety and looking at that big picture and taking the time to do it right.
Thank you. Very good insights. So Kathleen, one of the things we're faced with is alignment, and we need to align with our desired outcomes, which includes, we all talk about 100% by 2045, but you know, I tell people we're at 23 and a half, and by 2030, we have Act 238 and requiring us to be at 50%. How do you as a planning director and permit issuer work with this energy sector, this industry that's trying to achieve those goals that the state legislators and policymakers have put in place, and they can sometimes view you, not you personally, but the process as the barrier. How do we work around that and come to alignment?
I think there's several ways. One of the ways I just mentioned was updating the zoning code to allow that use in more districts. So that'll facilitate less permitting in the sense of change in zonings and things of their special use permits. You know, we also have to remember that, or I'm sure a lot of you know, that a lot of these projects end up on state agricultural land. So we are bound to follow Chapter 205. So working with legislators on that end to try to make it easier and more feasible, because I mean our land use rating maps are so antiquated and outdated, and things that are in, you know, A should be an F. I mean, but there's nothing we can do. There's absolutely nothing we can do to change that. So I think also working with the community plans as we update them to make sure that there's language in those plans that support these kinds of projects, bigger projects, would be helpful. And last, I would say, even I've only been director now since January 3rd, and I've already met with a consultant who's looking at doing a project in Lahaina, and it was ironic because this project is literally about 1/8 of a mile from my house. And I was like, yay. I was totally supportive of it. I think it's a great idea. I don't know how everybody else is going to feel about it when it comes up. But I see that bigger picture, that this is a good thing, especially for Lahaina, where in West Maui we can get cut off with fires, and it would hopefully supply some redundancy. So they know. And what I expressed to them was, you gotta have that community outreach. And that to me is one of the biggest hindrances in these projects, is that it may look good to some, but to others, they don't like it. So again, permitting is the technical part, but it's that emotional part we have to try to figure out.
Great, and you just mentioned the emotional part, and so I want to take it back to the private sector and development. So Gary, you have the, I'm going to say privilege, but maybe it's the challenge of working in multiple counties trying to secure permitting and so forth. And one of the concerns that have been shared with me by people in our sector is that you can't go to Hawaii Island and think that what you're going to get out of Maui County or Honolulu City and County or Kauai County will be the same. So could you speak to us about that, and perhaps while we have this captive audience here, share what some of your challenges and or opportunities you see with this?
Sure, thanks, Jacqui. So if I take the exact same technical project, a solar farm, wind farm, battery storage unit, and I put that same exact technical solution in all 50 states or 6 islands or 100 different locations. The culture and the local processes are going to be what makes those projects unique. And as developers, as engineers, we need to understand that we can't go in necessarily with a cookie cutter project approach. We may be able to go in with a cookie cutter technical approach, but it won't necessarily fit the local culture or the local jurisdiction's needs to meet their constituents. You know, they have responsibilities to their constituents. And so, once again, we take maybe the design can go fairly quickly because we've designed it 100 times before, but it's the community outreach, the permitting, the planning, the GIS solution that's unique about that project. And, you know, I like doing new things, right? So I could do the same project 100 different times, it'd be 100 different projects, and I'd learn 100 different lessons, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is I go to a lot of conferences, and I see a lot of folks in county planning groups, state planning groups, environmental groups, collaborating. And so it's not being done in a vacuum, right? I see Maui County learning from Hawaii County. I can tell you everywhere I go on the mainland, I get asked the same question. How's it going in Hawaii, Gary? How's it going in Hawaii? Because you guys are leading the way in so many different areas, and everybody's interested in, they want you to be successful, but they want to learn from your experience as well. And so when you're leading, when you're the only one heading towards the shark, that's a lot of responsibility. So once again, there's a lot of stress on the system. But I think the key is for the developers, for the engineers, is to understand the framework that they're working within from a cultural, from a jurisdictional perspective. There's some tools that jurisdictions have, where they can do some exemptions on certain things. They can expedite certain things. They can defer to, establish a jurisdictional lead at a different level. So there's some tools that a lot of jurisdictions have figured out that have been very effective at moving projects along quite quickly, actually. And then the other thing you mentioned is tools, right? So when you're in the for-profit side, the private side, the investment in upgrading your tools allows you to move much quicker. When you're on the public side, public sector, it's not necessarily that easy to upgrade your tools that quickly, right? So your capability to update zoning requirements, to update your planning requirements is just not that easy, because you have to finance that over a very small group of constituents, where I get to, as an engineering firm or as a developer, I get to monetize that investment over billions of dollars of investment, right? So there's a mismatch there from an investment perspective too. So.
Great, thank you. And that's a great segue for a question that I wanted to ask Jordan, having to do with, we've heard some of the challenges and recognize that I turn in a plan and someone will intervene, and sometimes there are multiple interventions, and those lead to, as Gary was just sharing, the monetization piece of that and the expense. What do really any of you have to share about that? But Jordan, I wanted to start with you, because I know with Public Works, you're constantly seeing intervention.
It's funny, talk about tools and the difficulty of upgrading. I'm sure a lot of you know about maps and some of the challenges that we've had implementing that new tool in an attempt to streamline our permitting process. And it is difficult to implement. These are heavy lifts. The framework is complicated because you have independent regulation that you're trying to balance, whereas private sector, you can just trim that stuff out and fit the tool better. So it is a challenge, and it just kind of goes back to, I think, the only real way to overcome it is just buy in, and Zendo mentioned, lean into the challenge and just embrace it and put it on your schedule and just plan for it.
I'd like to riff on the interventions real quick. Interventions play a couple different roles, I feel. One is it can stall a project. You got to go through the process of dealing with the intervention, good or bad. But what I've noticed that it's done that's systemic is it affects the team members, the staff members within an office. And when there's interventions that actually conflict with them, and let's say they lose or something goes wrong, it shifts the mindset into a mindset of playing not to lose versus playing to win. And that's something that we really worked with within our department when we came in there. I said, we need to shift how we're looking at these things. We cannot play scared. You're human. We're all human. We're going to make mistakes. It is going to happen. And it's okay. If you do it maliciously, I'm not the guy you want to deal with. But if you do it and it was truly a mistake, we'll work through it. We can do that. But if you're holding so tight because you're afraid of intervention that you cannot let something go or to make a decision, we lose. That's why things can take months and months and months too long, because they're afraid of the potential impact of the intervention. And so what happens is from a leadership perspective, I told them, you guys make a mistake, I'll take the bullet. I'll get hit by the bus. I got your guys back. Let's move forward, and the hell with the intervention. Let's deal with that. Let's do our job right and move it. Those interventions are so much more than just the project. They're so much harder. And we're dealing with Epic, same as MAPS, and it's been an epic journey from a tool perspective. But those interventions are more impactful than we actually realize from within the culture of the departments.
Thank you. And I think that's, a great segue to talk about when we do have these interventions and all of this is costing our community, our sector so much money and so forth. What do you recommend to, limit the number of interventions? And I know Zendo, but I'd like to ask Kathleen if something similar is happening on Maui, where there's been a lot of movement towards more collaboration and pre-planning, for lack of a better word, with the private sector, with the developers. And Kathleen, could you speak to that for a little bit?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, we've historically encouraged applicants to do pre-consults with neighbors, with community groups, and some are more willing than others, but I'm finding that more and more people are more willing to do that because, like, as you say, you're better off doing this at the front end than having your project stalled or be in a lawsuit at the back end. We are currently in an intervention for a very large solar project in Kihei, and it is costing taxpayers thousands of dollars because it's your taxpayer dollar that's paying for these attorneys. So I don't know if many people realize that. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that that's a fact and that's a reality, and it's holding the project, and it's going through its process. Sometimes I think you can do all the community outreach in the world, and there might be just those few that are still going to file that intervention. So it's not always a win-win situation, but I do think it helps. And we have more and more community groups that applicants can reach out to. Having just one is not enough. That's my advice. One is not enough.
Thank you. And so, Gary, we've been talking about interventions and so forth, and from your perspective, what do you see that could be added to the recipe with planning and permitting that would help private sector and developers in that respect?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and I don't think intervention is necessarily a negative thing. I want to hear from the community about what their concerns are when I'm developing a project, And I always used to tell, when I mentored young engineers, and they wouldn't get a job, they'd come to me, I didn't get the job. I said, why do you want to work for somebody that doesn't want you to work for them? Go where you're wanted, right? And so go where you're valued. And so I think as a developer, as an engineer, I want a project that I can be proud of. I want to have community outreach that's sophisticated. Here's the concerns, has the ability to incorporate. It is a lot cheaper to incorporate community concerns into a project at the front end than to deal with lawsuits on the back end. It is.
We like this guy.
Yeah. It is just so much cheaper to do it that way. And guess what? At the end of the day, if you're sourcing locally, you're creating local jobs, right? You're contributing to the United Way. You're coaching the junior high school basketball team. If that's the type of developer you are, the value you're adding to a community is really going to strip the negative-minded interveners from the power that they would typically possess. And so let's have the interveners come forward early and often. Let's hear their concerns. If they represent the community, let's work with the community and give them a successful project that the community can get value from it, from jobs, from education, from money inserted into their community, and they can have a project that they're proud of. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. And I'd like to remind the audience, if you have any questions, please use your app to ask them, and we'll be going into questions in about 4.5 minutes. But Jordan, from your perspective, as you've been listening to this conversation and you've been hearing from both private and public sector, from a public works perspective, what do you see as an opportunity for all of us in this room to really advance in working with permitting and planning and so forth, so that we can achieve those 2030 and 2045 benchmarks?
I don't know if I'll call it an opportunity, but perhaps a challenge to be better on both fronts. One of the complaints, it was mentioned earlier, like just the quality of submissions. And one of the frustrations as a permitting agency is being used as the quality control for applications. And that just creates this adversarial relationship between the staff and the consultants or the design professionals that treat it that way. And so it kind of goes back to my points about empathy. If the applicants are trying to their best to get through, to help me do a better job getting through their permits, then that builds that relationship of us wanting to do better to get through your permit timely. And so I would, put that out as the challenge to everybody to, put in that effort, and like you said, on the planning front, to be prepared on what you need to get a good application in, and to reduce the number of resubmittals and just that frustration that comes along with getting stuck in the process.
Great, thank you. So for all of you, our planning directors, one of the questions that came up, and it's been put in here a couple of times, so I understand why culture needs to be considered for large ground mount PV system, but for a permit for a single existing house, rooftop solar, how does culture become a piece of that conversation and that permitting requirement, and why?
So for a rooftop PV solar amount, and so everything I say here too, I intend to not offend anybody. It's all based in love always. The cultural component to that is very different than, say, a greenfield development that's going to be going in. When I look at a rooftop PV solar system, that is to help keep our children on the island and not export them. For me, a PV solar top, as planning, we don't even review it. We don't want to. In my view, and I've told Public Works on our side, is it should be a permit that's issued like that. You enter it, you put it into the system, we issue a permit, the inspector goes out there and verifies that it was done properly. That, to me, is a culture of expeditedness and efficiency, and a really way to move us forward and change the culture of our permitting mindset. So that's what I would do.
Great, thank you.
We don't review individual home solar systems, so it's just going to be the larger ones that require some kind of discretionary permit.
So what I'm hearing here is perhaps, and that's one of the reasons we brought Mahina up with us, is communication is so important, and sometimes we're not speaking the same language, and also we're creating expectations for ourselves and making assumptions and perhaps making the job a little bit harder for ourselves. And Zendo and Jordan, both of you have indicated, and Zendo, you and I have talked about this, about shared accountability.
Shared accountability is key. So I've spanned both public and private sector, and the street really needs to go both ways, right? And so we need to be accountable, but we need to come together and really have that accountability be both sides. So if applications are coming in, as Jordan had mentioned, if they're clean, we can move them. If they're not, there's going to be an impact to that. But I also find it very tricky, and this is coming into these positions, there's been a pattern already established, and you can all relate this coming into a new position. And everybody knows what a treadmill is, Sure. Imagine just going to the top as you could possibly go and things just whoop, spinning at whatever that is, 50 miles an hour. And you, as a director, you jump on and you give it all you got. And it's just going as fast as you can just to keep up. And meanwhile, there's all these elements that are happening. And if I had it my way, we would sit down, we'd kind of pause, we'd sit down with community, with the professionals, with the department, and get very, very clear, here's what we need to do. But the key is that we need to have that mutual accountability, and it's really easy to blame government, and it's really easy for the government to go back out and blame, well, it's the applicant. Lose, lose, lose. So we do our job, applicants do their job, and we both hold each other accountable. Two-way street, we win. And it's very simple, but much harder than I thought it was going to be. But we'll keep pushing on it.
Yeah, same. I mean, you know, a lot of permit reviewers don't get the opportunity to be permit applicants and vice versa. So we don't understand each other's world. I'm fortunate to have hopped around in our department. I have one office that's trying to get projects done, grumbling about the process, and then I have the other office that is the process. So, you know, I get the fortune of seeing both sides on the regular. But yeah, it's I guess leadership, and I guess my, you know, time here to kind of push that message of, you know, we are partners in this. We are building our communities together. We just have a different role to play in that life cycle, and just trying to, you know, instill that in our staff, and then trying to get the applicants to understand that as well. That, you know, we're not trying to foster this adversarial relationship with each other.
Thank you. So, Gary, and this is also going to be for Kathleen and Zendo, but one of the challenges that I keep hearing about on Hawaii Island, for example, is that it's taking too long for these permits to be issued, and in other jurisdictions, I would get my permit in 8 days, 10 days, 12 days. And I have a specific question here that is asking whether either county tracks average permit turnaround time compared to the West Coast, such as California and so forth. But as someone who's doing this on the ground, is that anecdotal, or it's your experience that, yeah, Hawaii is really slow?
So a couple of points on that, and I appreciate that the grass is always greener on the other side, right? So, Hawaii has achieved levels of PV solar penetration, rooftop, that no other state has achieved. And so you're really in uncharted territory. And I don't want to speak for Hawaiian Electric, but the challenges that rooftop solar put on the electric grid, you know, the grid was not designed for those challenges. And so you guys have accomplished quite a bit on the rooftop solar side that other folks are, quite frankly, scared of and are swimming away from. So congratulations to Hawaii and to Hawaiian Electric for making that happen. So I think that's a positive. California has put in place a few rules, and just to be candid, based on solar industry pressure, to, you know, turn around applications very quickly. I think the California utilities, for example, have 72 hours to respond to a rooftop solar application. And so, however, some of the jurisdictions I talked to there are kind of happy with that, because now it's a compliance issue and they can hire more people. So, right? So if you're forced to do it by gunpoint, right, then you don't have a choice, right? Is that what the community wants? I don't know. Is that what the solar industry wants? Yeah, probably. So, so it's a double-edged sword. You know, you have to be careful. I don't want to overwork my jurisdictions to the point where they can't retain talent. They can't get new people coming in, right? The management teams are constantly rotating out, and you lose all that knowledge because it's just a burnout type job, you know. That, you have to be careful about that, I think. And once, as I stated originally, we are in a really transformational level of effort when it comes to the energy sector. So I would say yes, there are some things happening on the West Coast specifically to kind of speed up the process. What the unintended consequences of those speeding that process is we really don't know yet. I don't think so.
Great, and I know that both Zendo and Kathleen are concerned about those unintended consequences, as is everyone in this room. So Zendo, do you compare, or is it worth comparing, how quickly you expedite or process permits to other mainland jurisdictions, for example?
I do think there's value in comparing, just because it gives you a frame of reference. That being said, I still think we have a long ways to go. We're not where we want to be as a county. We're not. I'm not a person who likes to come up with excuses, so we don't. What we need to do is keep shifting and adjusting to the parameters that we have right now and making those shifts and adjustments for a new paradigm that we have right now to move things forward. And as I say, really trying to play to win. And so to put it simple, I'm not satisfied where Hawaii County is with permitting yet at all. And it's something that's actually brought tears to my eyes, not so much from the energy perspective, but when people are waiting for permits and they can't work. That can exacerbate situations at home, which can lead to a really poor home environment for young children. And that is directly tied to permitting. And so I'm very passionate about this stuff. Like, I get pissed when permits aren't coming out. I only can control what I can control, and I will do what we can. There's others that I don't have control over, but will encourage and speak kindly and yell, curse, whatever it takes to move it forward, and I'm not satisfied.
Great. And to continue this discussion a little bit, Kathleen, to Gary's point that you could turn in or submit plans to 5 different reviewers and get 5 different responses. And we're concerned, of course, we all are faced with labor shortages and so forth, and we are concerned with the turnover rate of plan reviewers and so forth. What mana'o do you have to share with us about that?
So I've heard that complaint even when I was a planner, and we're really, one of my things that I've done when I've come in is my first departmental meeting, I talked to the staff and I said, consistency, that is my mantra, that I am very analytical, I am a consistent person, whether it comes to personnel, permits, or what have you. So just like within the first month, I had 3 letters that were going out to 3 different applicants that were about the same thing, and they were similar, but a little different. And I had all 3 planners and us, and I said, we're gonna make these all the same, exactly the same. We're saying the same thing. So part of that comes from the top and having to spend that time and resource on looking at these things, and also the training. We have had a lot of turnover. Zendo and I were talking in the back. We're running at 20-25% vacancy. I know Jordan has a lot of vacancies. So you have a lot of new staff that's coming in. And so spending that time with the new staff and mentoring them and trying to get everything consistent. I know it happens, but we're doing our best to try to nip that in the bud.
Great, thank you. We have about a minute left, and I'd like Jordan to wrap this up for us with your last words of mana'o, please. And to the audience, all of the panelists are here and available for the next day and a half to speak with you.
You know, for us, for myself, we recognize the priority that the state and the counties are facing with our energy. And I think it was stated earlier today, squeaky wheels. That's what it takes sometimes. We're all overwhelmed. You gotta let us know so we can try and help you. And yeah, if you guys can do your part in trying to make your submissions better to us, we can do our part by getting them turned around quicker. Yeah, call me when you get stuck.
Thank you, and I think, you know, we heard the word fear used several times, so I hope that this conversation has helped the audience as well as the people on stage learn that the culture of fear is not one that we need to operate in, especially as we're trying to move forward with our energy initiatives. Thank you all for being here, and I believe we have a little bit of a break now, and we look forward to seeing you all return after this. Aloha.